The topic is how to gain a greater reward. And we went through everything, almost everything on the page. We're just about finished. But the very last thing in the right-hand corner is faithful with time. That comes under a subtopic, faithfulness. We looked at faithful with money, faithful with time. Those are the two commodities that God gives us, time and money. And we're going to be held accountable for what we do with our money and what we do with our time. Every day, stop and think about it. Those are the two choices that we have to make every day. What am I going to do with my time? What am I going to do with my money? We talked about money. Today we want to talk about time. I've given you some verses there from Matthew 20, but I think I'd prefer that we just turn to it in our Bible and look at the whole passage. So if we turn to Matthew 20, we'll look at this in more detail. Jesus tells a parable here about the workers in the vineyard. Okay, I'll start reading. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. Now when he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them to his vineyard. And he went out about the third hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace and said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right I will give you." So they went. So how much later did they go? 3 hours.
3 hours.
Yeah. First group went at a certain time, and then the next group went 3 hours later. And he agreed to pay them whatever was right. Now, the first group, he agreed to pay them a denarius, which was a certain amount of money. Second group, he said, I'll give you what's right. Now, verse 5. Again, he went out about the 6th hour. And the 9th hour. By the way, the hour started at 6 a.m. So we're talking about 6 o'clock, another group at 9 o'clock. 6th hour would be 12 o'clock. 9th hour would be 3 o'clock. Every 3 hours, he sent out more laborers into the vineyard. And where are the first ones while the other ones are coming? They're working. So, after 9 hours, how long had the first group been working? 9 hours.
They did take lunch.
Yeah, I don't know if they took lunch or not, but anyway. Verse 6. And about the 11th hour, what time is that? 5 o'clock. He went out and found others standing idle and said to them, "Why have you been standing here idle all day?" They said to him, "Because no one hired us." He said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right, you will receive." So when evening, verse 8, when evening had come, the owner of the vineyard said to his steward, "Call the laborers and give them their wages, beginning with the last to the first." And when those came who were hired about the 11th hour, they each received what? Denarius. That's the same amount that he promised the first group. And how long had they worked? 12 hours. So the people that worked 1 hour got a denarius. Verse 10. But when the first came, they supposed that they would receive more. And they likewise received each a denarius. So let's stop right there. How would you feel if you were one of the guys that worked for 12 hours?
I wish I had waited. Almost waited.
You work for 12, they work for 1. They get a denarius, you get a denarius. There's not a guy in this room that wouldn't be upset by that, I don't think. They would think that is fair. That's just not fair, that's not right. So anyway, we're down to verse 11. And when they had received it, they what? Complained. You have to almost laugh. I mean, it's so human here. They complained against the landowner, saying, these last men have worked only 1 hour, and you made them equal to us who have borne the burden and the heat of the day. So it's not just time. What else is it? It's hot. We've been out in the heat. We worked for 12 hours in the heat. These guys came at 5 o'clock. It wasn't heat. Not only was it just an hour, but it was. That was the easiest part. Well, maybe 6 o'clock was 6 to 9 was fine, but they were there from 9 to 3. They were there in the heat of the day and beyond. And that's a long day, 12-hour day to work out in the vineyard. All right? So, verse 13. But he answered one of them and said, friend, I'm doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Was the answer to his question? Yes. Take what is yours and go your way. I wish to give to this last man the same as to you. Is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with my own things? Or is your eye evil because I am good? So the last will be first, the first last. Many are called, a few chosen. All right. Now, it's interesting that Jesus doesn't really elaborate on what this represents. He just says the first will be last and the last will be first. But, I mean, it just doesn't sound right. It doesn't seem right. And yet he's representing, well, in the parable, who do you think the landowner represents? Yeah. Yeah. But think about it. Who would the laborers that went out at 6 o'clock, who would they represent? Who would compared to the laborers that came at different times?
Believers and new believers.
Yeah, you're right. Yes, absolutely. Believers and then newer believers. Well, the sixth, going back to the vineyard in terms of timing, if you're a believer, what does going out of the vineyard represent? Yes. But what's going? Yes, in terms of timing. But what is going out of the vineyard? What is working in the vineyard represent?
Sharing the gospel.
Being a disciple. Your discipleship is the moment you believe in how you live your life.
Yeah, all of the above. If I could summarize it, working in the vineyard represents everything on this page. Fair enough? Good works with right motives, your spiritual life. I'm just reading. Prayer, Bible, church, overcoming sin, suffering with Christ, service to others, to your family, to your enemies, evangelism, faithful with your money. It represents everything that God wants you to do to serve Him. Because who were these laborers serving? The landowner. Their job was to serve the landowner and do what he hired him to do. And that is to make a profit for the landowner through the work that they did. Their work was all about pleasing the landowner and doing what he commissioned them to do. So this represents Jesus and you. Working in the vineyard represents everything you do. Everything. Everything you do. Louis?
Bob, this has a lot of meaning to me. My dad accepted Christ on his deathbed,
Yes.
but he accepted Christ.
Yes. You're on the right track of what this parable is about. So let's elaborate some more. Bill, you talked about it. What do the different times of work represent?
Some people believe later in life, but they still get the same eternal salvation.
Yeah.
The same denarius, what represents eternal salvation, in my opinion, in this parable, because it can't represent work because they didn't have the opportunity to do much work.
Yeah. Well,
But it's still,
we're going to beat that around some more, what you
I'm not
just said.
saying that their works don't count just as much.
We're going to beat that around a little bit, what you just said. Theologically, I totally agree with what you said. But we need to wrestle some more with the details of the parable. Okay, so without saying what the denarius represents, let's talk about the different amounts of time that they worked in the vineyard. I think we've already answered it. Louis really hit the nail on the head, but let's make sure we got this. What do the different amounts of time working in the vineyard represent? It's already been said.
From the moment that's done.
Pardon?
How long they've been a disciple for Christ?
Until when?
Before they die.
Till they die. How long have you been serving Jesus? In terms of time. Does everybody serve Jesus the same amount of time in their life? No. Some people serve Jesus a long time. Some people serve Jesus a short time. That's what the parable's talking about. That's what Jesus is talking about, is length of service. And what determines the beginning point? We've already said it, but the moment you believe, does God make you a servant the moment you believe? I got one yes, but it was a good one. Yeah. You are called to be a servant the moment you believe. Do all believers serve Him equally well? No, you're either a good servant or a bad servant. We've seen other parables where Jesus taught that. But when you believed in Jesus for eternal life, you weren't thinking about being a servant. Shouldn't have been, because that wasn't the issue. But then you find out, He wanted me to serve Him. When He gave me everlasting life, He wanted me to serve Him. So how many believers are servants? Good answer. How many believers are good servants?
Just the ones that.
Yeah, let's just,
One or two.
yeah, let's say, no, that's not right. Some. Okay, is it the same, I asked you how many believers are servants, you said all. If I said how many believers are good servants, could you say all? No, please don't. Sad, but true. Not all believers are good servants. And, I'm not a good servant consistently. Neither are you. We all stumble as servants, but, overall, the overall measurement of our service, Jesus made it very clear in a number of parables. There are good servants, there are evil servants. There are faithful servants, there are lazy servants. Right? We've seen those parables. How about the people in this parable? What kind of servants? I'm going to break it down. How would you characterize the service of the 12-hour service? Good or bad? How would you characterize the service of the 6-hour service? I say pretty good.
They got the same life.
Is there anything in here to indicate that they did a bad job? Anything? No. How about the 3-hour service? As far as we know, how did they do?
Wonderful.
How about the 1-hour service? Anything to indicate the quality of their work? No, just he paid them. There was no complaint from the landowner about the quality of service of any of them. And I think we need to keep that in mind. He paid them all what he agreed to pay them. He didn't complain about the job they did. So we should assume they all did their job. They all did what they signed up to do. So the parable doesn't talk about, there are other parables that talk about quality of service. This, and how it could be different. This parable doesn't. It assumes that they all did their job. Okay? So my question was, when each one started, what does that represent? The timing of service begins when? When does the timing of your service end? Die, or what? Or the rapture? Okay, so how many of us in the room are in the vineyard right now? We're all in the vineyard right now. Now, some of you have been in service for a long time. Some of you not so long. Okay. So I guess the question is, who's been saved for more than 50 years? Who's been saved for less than 50 years? Who's been saved for less than 10 years? How long have you been saved? About 3 months. You've been in the vineyard for 3 months. Okay. Well, I've been in the vineyard for about 66 years. I've been in the vineyard for 66 years. You've been in the vineyard for 3 months. Based on this parable, who's going to do better at the judgment seat? Who's good? Based on just time factor.
Never been signed. Based on.
Who's got the greater potential for reward?
Based on this parable.
Based on the parable.
Potential for reward? Then I would think longevity would have something to do with that. You got more time to give.
Does anybody
Yeah,
have
got
a
more time.
contrary opinion?
I think last time depends on what you do with the time you have. And if you do great, just because you believed it for 3 months, you've got just the same amount of potential to
Yeah.
right.
Based on this parable, you guys are both in this.
Well, there are other factors. But based on the parable
That's what
itself.
your question was, based on this parable.
Based on the parable itself,
That's what you said.
yes. Now, there are other parables that add to this.
Right.
This parable just gives us one dimension of how Jesus will reward. What's the issue here? Time. How much time you spend. What's the issue in other parables? Quality. Yeah, this is talking about quantity of time. There are other parables talking about the quality of the work. Because within the parable, well, he didn't do it in this parable, but you know, it's possible that in another parable, that workers don't all do the equal quality. Some of them are lazy. They just went in the corner and took a nap, hid out, didn't do the job well, and they'll be judged according to that. In this parable, everybody seemed to have done a good job. So, Jim, I just drew a blank on your name again. Cedric. Cedric's had 3 months. If the rapture occurs this week, we're both done. Cedric's done and I'm done. I come before the Lord 66 years. You come before the Lord, I got 3 months. Based on the parable. Well, based on the parable, just based on the parable alone, which of us, what reward would each of us get? The same. But there's other factors. Based on the parable and other parables, based on other parables, is it possible that Cedric would get a greater reward?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely.
Doesn't this parable teach us that there are other factors without telling us what those factors are? Because it's counterintuitive to think that they get the same reward because they spent different amounts of time. The landlord has a perspective that we don't have. He sees all of it. All we see is what's right in front of us. So that seems to be the lesson here, right?
I think, I like your question, but here's how I would answer it. To me, the parable doesn't get us to want to know more of what happened in the story. To me, the parable shouts, are there other parables? Are there other stories that tell us other factors? Because this parable, it seems that the landowner, if he represents Jesus, is being fair. In fact, that's shouts to us from the parable. He was fair. It would only be fair if they all did a good job. If time was the only factor. It wouldn't be fair if some of them were lazy, that he would give them the same denarius. That's why, to me, the parable shouts, this is powerful in itself, but there must be other factors. And sure enough, there are. So I'm going to repeat this. You answered it well. It's possible that Cedric will gain a greater reward than me in the kingdom based on the parable. Or the parable says it's possible that Cedric and I would get the same reward. If we're going to stick with the parable, if it's based on time alone, he's got just as much opportunity to gain the same reward as me. Is it possible that he would gain I already said, it's possible that he could gain a greater reward. Did I already ask that?
Absolutely.
Based on the parable, we could say it's possible that we would get an equal reward, but based on other parables, it's possible that he could gain a greater reward. So, I love this parable. I think it's really needed and really powerful and really encouraging and really helpful to remind us that it's not the amount of time that you have. What is the factor? The quality. What you do with the time that you have. And what he does, what Cedric does with his 3 months is very important to God. What I do with my 66 years is very important to God. I will be judged based on what I did with the time God gave me. So will he. Mark.
To me, the perfect example is the thief on the cross.
Yeah.
We have heard of him
Yeah.
throughout the ages, so we will.
Yeah. I want us to look at him in a moment.
Okay.
I think, now there's a great example. How long, well, let's hold off and we'll get to him. Okay, does this make sense? Does anybody have a question about it? Does it make sense?
They said it was me, Bob, that said
was going to leave for 3 months, and he's giving it all during that 3 months. You're going to believe for 66 years, you've been laid into anything, and I think his reward will be greater than yours.
Bob, could
Yes.
could the mayor represent an eternal life, maybe not reward, saying that everybody's got equal opportunity once they believe?
No, I don't think so. The denarius represents the reward. Because what did they have to do to get it? Work.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's why I said we need to think more about what you said earlier.
Yeah.
They get it
Right.
because they believe, but it is not eternal life. They
They
don't-
don't, like them getting hired is a simple principle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. When they got hired represents eternal life.
Okay.
When they get paid represents the reward. And there's a big time gap between the two. Okay. Douglas?
Question on verse 16, sounds like a summary verse of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I kind of get the last three verses, first line, but I'm not sure I understand when you're called, you're chosen.
Yeah, I wrestled with that also. I think it's meaning many are called to a great reward, but few are chosen to get the great reward. Something like that. Because the parable implies that not everybody's going to be faithful. That's what Josh said. There's an implication or a calling here for more information. And I think Jesus is reminding us here of what Josh brought up. The parable talks about equal reward. But Jesus is reminding us that the reward won't be equal. It'll be equal based on time, but not on other factors. That's what I think. If the first will be last and last first, that's within the parable. But the parable shouts that there's other factors, but the parable itself doesn't delineate those other factors. It just talks about time. Okay, George.
Should it be mentioned that we aren't held accountable prior to us going into the field or believing?
Absolutely. What were they paid for?
Just while they were in the field?
Just while they were in the field. This is good, George. This is,
To me, that's important, because prior to going into the field, it's kind of ugly.
thank you, I'm going to underscore it. These people were only paid for the time they were in the vineyard, the reward.
Right.
He didn't even bring up what they did before they got in the vineyard. It had nothing to do with their reward. So, how old are you, Cedric? 41. So for 40, what is there in Cedric's first 40 years that's going to be brought up at the judgment seat? Nothing. Nothing. That's not important to God in terms of your reward. It's only the last 3 months that you'll be accountable for. Okay? His story's better than mine because I was 8 years old. But anyway, God's not going to bring up what I did for the first 8 years of my life. God's not going to bring up what he did for the first 40 years of his life. It's only what we did while we're in the vineyard, since the day we were called to service, which was the day we believed, that we'll be accountable for. What other comments or questions do you have?
I think it's important to know the other parables don't mention time.
I don't think so. No,
This is a piece of the puzzle.
this is a piece of the puzzle, yes. This is a piece of the puzzle. The other parables mention faithfulness and quality. This is just talking about quantity. To summarize it, quantity is not what will separate the greatness of reward. What did I say? Quantity of time. And I could add their quantity of works overall. This parable emphasizes that God measures the quantity based on the opportunity that we have if that makes sense. All right, let me turn to another passage that I think helps me anyway. Just turn back a couple of pages to Matthew 18. Okay, verse 1. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Then Jesus called a little child to him and set him in the midst of them and said, "Surely I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever sees one little child like this in my name receives me." Based on the parable, what particular group of people has potential to be great in the kingdom?
Little children.
Children. Okay. Children have potential to be great, to be the greatest in the kingdom. In verse 4, what's the key to their greatness? What is the key that made them great? Humble. Humble. Okay.
Hey, Bob,
Yeah.
did we also say that people who become like children would also could be great in the kingdom?
Yep.
If they become like a child and have that quality.
That's what he says.
Right?
Whoever humbles himself as this child,
Okay, so adults also, as long as they become like children.
as long as they become like children.
Okay.
And I'm focusing on the first part, the child himself. But the point is 100% well taken. Jesus is talking to adults and saying you need to be humble like this child that's in their midst. But let's not overlook the fact that he's talking about children here too, right? So we've got children here in our church that are getting saved, and they're getting baptized, and they're okay. Does God care about what those children do each day? Will they be rewarded, or do they have the potential to be rewarded for what they do each day? Do they have the potential to lose reward? Yep. They're accountable. Children are accountable. Believing children are accountable in terms of their reward. So, again, I've been saved for 66 years. We've got children that are being saved and are saved that, let's say these children are saved and they're born again and they live for 3 months or a year, or 2 years, then the rapture comes. Okay, here I am at the judgment seat with 66 years, and here's a child with 6 months before the rapture came. This child was saved 6 months later, the rapture came. Based on the parable, who has the potential for the greater reward? Both. Is it a given that I will gain a greater reward than this child? Please say no. Is it, based on the parable, is there potential for this child to receive a greater reward than me? Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, there's a high probability that that could happen. Because I can tell you one thing, that child's a lot more innocent than I am about lots of things. But God weighs it all out. But time is not the issue. It's what did that child do in the time that he or she had? What did I do in the time that I had? I came at 6 o'clock. That child came at 11 o'clock. And based on the parable, the potential for reward is the same. By the way, let's think about, what kind of things can a child do to gain reward? Many things we can say. What can a child do to gain, that would gain that child's greater reward?
Invite their friends to church,
Invite their friends to church.
like,
Pray.
come to the youth. You come out here every week.
Obey their parents.
Obey their parents. Will that child be rewarded for obeying his parents? Yep.
Be kind to their friends.
Be kind to their friends,
Kind of their brothers and sisters.
and to their brothers and sisters.
You know, when you talk about,
Stop it.
when you talk about children's potential, you have to put in there, and it's for anybody, but children especially, to gain a greater reward, they may be given an opportunity to do something that makes them stand out for Christ. You know, like you see kids every once in a while that get it in their head to raise money to feed hungry people. And not very many adults do that, you know. It all depends on what, you might say, I wasn't given an opportunity, I didn't have enough opportunities. And the next guy might say, I stayed busy trying to make opportunities.
Yeah.
Bob, you think there's some difference, he said little children, he doesn't just like children, he says little children.
Yeah, maybe so, because we're all children. So maybe that was kind
Maybe
of,
it's like, they're innocent, or they're secure, until you can really physically think. It's an innocent and humble, they're kind of helpless, humble and helpless, and they rely on the father, the mother, like we should rely on our father, like we rely on God.
right. And they have a, yes, they have a simple faith.
Yeah, what does this humble mean? Like what Bill is saying, what does it mean to be humble like a child? Does that mean take instruction? Or
Rely on God.
They don't have as many defense mechanisms. They don't, you know, when it comes to salvation, studies have shown that children are way more open to believe than adults.
so teachable?
Teachers,
Because they are selfish to no end, and let me tell you, the younger they are, the more selfish they are. They have to be taught to not be that way. The more dependent they are.
Is that where the terrible twos come in?
yeah, well, yeah,
Maybe not that.
I'm not sure how many 2-year-olds are saved. I don't think they're any. Personally, I think you have to be old enough to understand to say the message. So
Understand but not articulate it back to a question asker.
you may not be able to articulate it. But I think any saved child needs to articulate, well, need to articulate it to some degree. They need to know that they believe that Jesus is going to give them everlasting life, and may not put it in those
Yeah,
exact terms.
I think they can know it without saying it back to a person. My kids have understood concepts that we know they understand based on their actions, but can't tell us that they understand.
Yeah, I understand. So, and ultimately, only God knows exactly the moment when that child is saved. But there is a moment where God sees that faith in the heart and gives that child everlasting life. But humble, children are much more humble because in terms of their openness to the teaching of Jesus. Adults are much more resistant. It can't be that easy. It can't be all you have to do is believe. Children say, oh, that's all it takes is to believe. Now, they have to be taught this. Many times children are taught that if you're not good, you won't go to heaven, so we have to overcome that. But children are much more open, and I think that's it. And I think that he's implying that children are much more open to wanting to please Jesus. And wanting to do what makes Jesus happy. I hope that helps you compare the parable with children. It does for me. I think that really brings it home to me. I look at these children that are out here. We just have, lately we've been having over 200 children out here on Wednesday night. It's unbelievable, the excitement out here on Wednesday night with all these kids. But let's look at them and think about what we're reading here. Man, some of these kids are going to be great in the kingdom. I think we have a tendency to look at children, oh, they're just children. Well, God doesn't look at them as just children. He looks at them as great. They're great people, some of them. Some of them are really great people. They love God, they talk to Jesus, they pray, they obey their parents, they're trying to reach their friends to bring them to hear about Jesus. I mean, Jesus looks at these kids, many of them, as great, and they will be great in the kingdom. It puts things in perspective, really. Realize that some of them are going to do much better than me at the judgment seat of Christ. I've been saved for 66 years, and I've tried to serve God, but some of these kids, I think, are will fare better than me at the judgment seat. It's not about time or volume. It's about faithfulness to the time given.